Well, good morning, folks. I want to thank everybody for joining us today for this final meeting of the Critical Minerals Policy Working Group. We're here today to introduce the bipartisan legislation crafted by the working group and to transmit the working group's report, its proposed legislation in support of our colleagues' outside bills to the chairman and ranking member. I'll turn to the working group's findings and the bills that the working group is endorsing today shortly. After that, I'll invite Representative Castor to speak on these bills and invite brief comments from Chairman Molinar and Ranking Member Krishnamurthy, and then invite each member of the working group to share perspectives on the legislation and their experience on the working group. Over the past 6 months, the bipartisan group has brought together experts from industry, academia, and government to tackle one of the most pressing challenges of our time: securing a resilient and sustainable supply of critical minerals. These materials, such as lithium, cobalt, gallium, and germanium, are the lifeblood of modern technology, energy, and defense systems. Yet we remain dangerously reliant on imports from the People's Republic of China, which accounts for a significant portion of the world's mineral processing and continues to leverage its dominance for geopolitical gain. We've witnessed China's weaponization of supply chains, most recently its export restrictions on gallium, germanium, and antimony. These elements are critical to semiconductors, defense applications, and energy. These actions are a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities in our supply chains and the urgency of our work. The working group has made significant strides in identifying solutions, and I'm happy to announce 3 pieces of bipartisan legislation that we introduced today. The first is the Earth Sciences and Cooperation Enhancement Act, which authorizes the Secretary of Interior to enter into an MOU with foreign governments to facilitate collaboration on earth sciences and critical mineral supply chains. These agreements will encourage cooperation with foreign governments to advance geological mapping, mineral resource assessment, data analysis, and training in environmental and workplace standards. The second is the amend the Export Reform Control Act of 2018, which implements export controls on black mass and swarf to prevent exploitation by foreign adversaries, particularly the PRC. The bill aims to strengthen domestic critical mineral supply chains, support battery recycling and processing industries, and counter PRC market manipulations. Specifically, it will address the troublesome effort where we take recycled materials in the form of black mass, many of which originated in China, put them together and send the black mass back to China for China to sell that back to us again. Very, very troubling. This bill addresses that. The third bill is the Critical Minerals Workforce Enhancement Act, and that's aimed at strengthening the U.S. workforce in mining, refining, processing, and recycling critical minerals by fostering domestic expertise and promoting international student exchanges. In addition to these bills, we've explored price support mechanisms to develop critical mineral supply chains. This is an ambitious legislative solution that will require additional coordination with our colleagues across the aisle to find a bipartisan consensus, and I look forward to working with them on this in the new Congress. We're also pleased to release a report which outlines these initiatives in detail and reinforces our support of outside bills drafted by our colleagues in the House and Senate, such as those promoting transparency in supply chains and addressing forced labor linked to critical mineral production. The insights we've gained underscore that a multifaceted approach is essential, one that includes expanding domestic mining and production, recycling, and innovative sourcing methods. This effort is more than just about economic security. It's about safeguarding our national security, maintaining our technological capacity, and ensuring that the United States is in position to sustain these critical supply chains in the future. Our proposed legislation will be filed later today, and we look forward to working with the chairman, the ranking member, and the committees of jurisdiction to expeditiously pass these bills through the standing committees and move them onto the floor in the next Congress. After we conclude the working group's remarks, we will close the meeting, and some of us will be happy to answer any additional questions from the media. And now I yield the floor to my colleague and friend, Ms. Castor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Whitman. Thank you all for being here today. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about this important topic. Critical minerals are essential to America's economic and national security, and the Select Committee on Strategic Competition with the Chinese Communist Party is quite a name, isn't it? But I've been so gratified by the important bipartisan work of this committee, and thank Chair Molinar, especially Chair Gallagher, all of the members, Ranking Member Krishnamurthy, who will be with us shortly. But it's been a special pleasure to work with my good friend, Rob Whitman of Virginia, on this work group. I think it was smart to kind of peel off the subject because we can get in the weeds, we can really nerd out, and that's what we've done. And we haven't just done that, but we have really come together in a bipartisan way with some recommended pieces of legislation and a summary report. So today is, as we conclude our work, we're going to introduce three bipartisan bills that begin to address these challenges, as well as the report is bipartisan as well. And we mention other legislation that's floating around that we can focus on in the new Congress. I also want to thank Representative Stevens and Torres and the other members of the work group. They're going to be here to hopefully to talk about their bills. I think it's important too to say to all of the witnesses who appeared before the work group, all of the stakeholders who have engaged in this, that we continue to need your help and expertise to move the legislation forward. This is really just a start. We know that there are serious vulnerabilities in our supply chains in America. We are dependent on imports, but we are going to take a big swing at improving that and strengthening what we do domestically, strengthen what we do with our international partners, focus on environmental sustainability, workforce development, and national security considerations. You know, in prior Congresses, I had the pleasure of leading another select committee, the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, and I went back and looked at our major report at that time, and we had a lot of a number of recommendations on strengthening America's industrial base and securing our critical mineral supply chains. So it's been especially gratifying to kind of see a through line from a lot of the work on that previous Select Committee to the adoption of the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and then kudos to the Biden-Harris administration that have done such important work in building up that industrial base. In the past 4 years, we've seen companies announce more than $120 billion in investments in battery and critical mineral supply chains across America, from mining to manufacturing to recycling. This transformation has largely been fueled by grants, loans, and tax credits funded by the infrastructure law and the IRA. In 2021, the U.S. had enough battery manufacturing capacity to power 500,000 electric vehicles. Today, announced battery gigafactories will power 10 million electric vehicles. And after years of China using its economically malign focus to kind of crowd out American technology and innovation, we are not standing still any longer. We are protecting our industrial base. We're creating good jobs, strengthening our energy and national security, thanks to their efforts to secure critical mineral supply chains. But look, we have a long way to go. This doesn't happen overnight. It takes very significant focus, and it takes policy adopted by Congress. A lot of what the Biden-Harris administration has done needs to be codified into law, and I know Chair Molinar and Ranking Member Krishnamurthy have some ideas about that to do today. So today and then moving into the next Congress. So thanks all for being here. We want to I don't want to go into steal the thunder of too many others who are going to talk about the bills, but if you'd like me to kick off the first one, or you're going to, well, you want to go to the chairman next?
Yes,
Okay.
go to the chairman.
Terrific. Then we'll summarize a lot of the legislation and the report.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity again.
Well, Kathy, thank you. We'll now turn to our chairman, Chairman Mullen.
Right. Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank Congressman Whitman and Congresswoman Castor, as well as the policy working group members, the staff, and as you pointed out, the witnesses for their important contribution. And, I wanted to just highlight these policy working groups allow us to go deeper into some of these important areas. And I kind of liked your phrase, allowing you to nerd out in the, but critical minerals are one of our foremost points of vulnerability at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. And the CCP knows this and is determined to dominate these all-important supply chains. Just last week, the CCP imposed controls on the export of gallium, germanium, antimony, and other high-tech materials critical to the manufacturing of advanced defense and national security technology. And these actions demonstrate what our committee has long maintained, that the CCP sees trade as a tool of economic coercion and will utilize every point of leverage it possesses over American companies and supply chains. Today, the CCP processes 95% of the world's manganese, 73% of its cobalt, 70% of graphite, and 63% of global nickel. As with gallium, germanium, and antimony, the CCP can restrict or cut off these supplies at a moment's notice. Identifying alternative sources of these critical minerals is among the most urgent national security tasks this select committee has identified over the past 2 years. And under the leadership of Representatives Whitman and Castor, this working group has led this effort, quickly identifying the problem and proposing ambitious solutions that will help us secure these supplies. They put aside partisan differences to find common ground, turning many of the bipartisan recommendations in our December economic report into specific bills that will secure America in the next Congress. I'm proud of what they've done this year, and I look forward to working with the members here today to drive these bills in the new Congress. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks so much for your leadership. And we now go to our ranking member, Raja Krishnamurthy.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here, and thank you to Representatives Castor and Whitman for your exemplary leadership. Chairman Molinar, thank you for convening these policy working groups. I think they really did a great job, and they've been diligent, and with excellent staff work on both sides, they've really tackled some longstanding issues in a bipartisan way. And therefore, I think it's going to survive into the next Congress, and it's going to hopefully be enacted into law. So I'm really, really excited about what you guys did. I also want to thank the other members of this particular policy working group, namely Representatives Lutkemeyer, Stevens, Jimenez, Torres, and Klein. Thank you also for your enthusiastic participation. I heard from the staff that every meeting was really well attended, and the expert witnesses got some exceedingly good questions. So thank you. Look, folks, we don't need to belabor the point, but the reason why this working group was convened is critical minerals is a choke point for the U.S. Let's just be honest about that, and we have been. And because it's a choke point, it's an area of vulnerability. And we know that for an area of vulnerability, the Chinese Communist Party is going to exert coercion. Why? To get their way. It could be on policy matters. It could be on military matters. It could be on security matters. It could be on Taiwan. It could be on any number of things. And it could just simply be to exert economic pain. And that's why I'm bringing back my gag chart. The gag chart is back. Gallium, antimony, and germanium. They knew exactly where we were vulnerable. And as you can see with gallium, which is used in infrared sensors and a number of critical weapon systems, We import 100% of all gallium from China. This is crazy. This is absolute lunacy. And yet that's where we are today. But we have to recognize where we are today in order to figure out where we want to be tomorrow. So what Kathy and Representative Whitman and the group are doing is just so crucial. And so, Chairman, I think that I'm hoping that with the new president, I respectfully submit that these folks should go to the White House and present their findings, quite frankly, and bring it to the attention of the National Security Council, to our friend Mike Walls, to the president himself, and just basically say, look, we've got to fix this. And we have some bipartisan solutions, so let's get going. So that's what I hope comes out of your work today.
Well, Ranking Member Krishnamurthy, thanks so much, and thanks again for your leadership too. You've been out there in the forefront, and you are by far the most skilled at using visualization of these critical issues. There's nobody better at it than you. I thank you. Thank you for that. I'd like to go to our members now. Mr. Klein from Virginia. Any comments or thoughts or ideas?
Well, I thank the chairman, and I want to thank my good friend from Virginia for his leadership and expertise to navigate this critical national security issue in a bipartisan manner. The U.S. has a deep reliance on critical mineral imports, with many of its supply chains left vulnerable to market manipulation by the CCP, and the recently announced export controls by the Chinese on gallium and germanium only serve to strengthen our resolve and makes the work of this select committee all the more relevant. And today's report will serve as an important resource as we prepare for the 119th Congress, and includes ideas to increase cooperation with our allies to strengthen supply chains, and includes tools that enable us to go toe-to-toe with China. This select committee will continue to be a policy clearinghouse that we can leverage to bring workable solutions to our colleagues on our own committee assignments. And I'm thankful for the efforts that the staff have put into coordinating this initiative. Grateful to have been a part of it. I want to thank my colleagues who are on the working group for their hard work, and look forward to the future and achieving many of these goals. And with that, I yield back.
Very good. Well, thank you, Ben. We'll now go to Ms. Stevens.
Well, thank you to my colleague from Virginia, Mr. Whitman, and for your leadership alongside Congresswoman Castor of the Critical Minerals Working Group. I've got to say that this is probably one of the best working groups I've ever been a part of in Congress, in part because it's been dedicated, dogged, and determined. And even when other pressures were coming down on us, we really stayed focused and stayed the course. And a lot of that is attributed to the full Select Committee's leadership, run by Chairman Molinar and Ranking Member Krishnamurthy. So my heartfelt thanks to all of you in the leadership. And just over 6 months with the working group and the meetings and the exploration of a breadth and depth of the CCP's control and influence, the coercion that Mr. Krishnamurthy mentioned of the critical minerals supply chain globally. We feel like in some ways we're scratching the surface and we're diving in, and we're also making some introductions here for the American people. And so we know there's a lot to do, and the action is imperative. Some additional facts and figures for 41 of the 50 minerals identified by the United States as critical. Our nation is 50% or more reliant on foreign sources. For 7 of the 23 minerals identified by the Department of Energy, for the energy sector, our supply chains are already at risk, with that number doubling over the next 10 years. And critical minerals are increasingly important for commercial applications. Increasingly important means we're making more, right? We're making more, and we're certainly exploring and diving into the production in the clean energy and clean tech sector in a pronounced and demonstrative way. This is very palpable to us here in Michigan. And I'm a rep from Michigan, and we take really seriously the competition that the U.S. auto industry is in, and the transformation and the tipping point that they are in. They came to us over half a decade ago and said that they want to transform, that they want to be on the leading edge of the clean tech revolution. That has to do with hybrid vehicles and even more so electric vehicles, where this industry wants to remain dominant. Now, they didn't know at the time when they were making that pronouncement that the Chinese Communist Party was, of course, going to do what they are doing right now, which is dumping and trying to dominate in the automotive space. They're a large exporter. And so we've got to continue to manufacture and innovate. And with that, we've got to have access to critical minerals. I am a former, now, multiple administrations ago, but I'm a former Obama administration official. And when we were just dealing with the headwinds of the Great Recession, we looked at ourselves and said, we've got to do something about semiconductors, chips, and we've got to do something about critical minerals. This Congress acted last term to do something around chips. Today, we are saying that we want to do something on critical minerals. We know that critical minerals are absolutely critical, and particularly is determined by the supply and the demand that's always transforming around us. The gallium in semiconductors, they make our world spin and they power that AI economy. So manufacturing, economic development, and also national security, absolutely essential here. The multifaceted global policy problem is not going to be solved by a singular pillar or unilateral policy, something, that we're obviously grappling with tariffs here. So we've got to utilize all the tools in our toolbox. We've got to look at, at harnessing some of the capabilities with our legislation and true industrial policy. And this is why the work of this humble working group tied to a select committee has done, the work that we've done to evaluate various policies needed to solve these supply chain dependencies. So I've been deeply proud and delighted to share with members of the press here and the American people to work with these colleagues of mine to introduce this nicknamed bill, the Black Mass and Swarf Export Control Act of 2024. And thank you, Congressman Whitman, for that. And, this legislation is trying to amend that Export Control Act of 2018 to include limitations on the export of black mass and swarf or spent battery and rare earth magnet material. Go look these things up. It's amazing to look at how they're produced and found and diving into our manufacturing process. We want to prevent this stuff from going to our foreign adversaries. And by preventing high quality reusable material from leaving the United States, we can prevent the further undermining of the national and economic security of this country. We know that the CCP is invested heavily. We know where these dependencies lie. And the math remains simple. If we want to make 1 ton of cobalt and lithium, we need nearly 1,000 tons of raw cobalt ore and lithium brine. Or to make some of the same ton of cobalt and lithium, we'd need only 30 to 40 tons of spent lithium ion batteries. So a drastic difference here, folks. And I have to solicit my ranking member for another graphic on that front because that really could be another nice visual. So, look, the CCP's tried to position themselves as the global leader here, and it's not about saving the environment from unnecessary waste, but only to strengthen their grasp and to use that coercion on the world stage. So, therefore, we've got this Black Mass and Swarf Export Control Act to be a key piece of the multifaceted approach to de-risking our supply chains while supporting our broad goals of creating a sustainable, resilient, and traceable supply chain. And so in closing, it is nearly impossible to fully capture how important the critical minerals are to our nation. And the work being done here by this group in the past few months has been eye-opening, demonstrative, and inspiringly bipartisan. So let's keep up the work in the 119th Congress. And with that, Mr. Working Group Leader, I yield back.
Well, thank you, Ms. Stevens. Thanks so much for your commitment and your passion in this subject area. We know what it means not only to you, but to the great state of Michigan, but also our nation. So thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Jimenez from the great state of Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I also want to thank the ranking member, Mr. Krishnamurthy, for all his graphs and entertainment. I always looking forward when I come to not only here in this working group, but in the main committee. Looking forward to. Don't take this wrong, Mr. Chairman. It's good. You have a great opening line, but always I was looking forward to his because he's always got something. Okay, yeah, right. He's always got something, and so it's always entertaining, but also very informative, and it hits the point. Now, I think the point that I get from this working group is that. This is a chicken and egg thing. And what I mean by that is, does China control the supply of critical minerals around the world because they also do all of the processing? Or is it the other way around? They did the processing and therefore they control they needed the minerals. And so the key to the whole thing is the processing. I've spoken to ambassadors and folks from Peru and Chile, where China gets a lot of its raw materials from. And the facts are they will continue to control the trade because that's the only place that will process it. They would want to actually sell those minerals to us, but we don't have the capacity. And so I hope that one of the things that comes out of this particular working group is that we need to enhance the processing of these minerals and these rare earths here in the United States in order to develop a market for those countries that have those critical minerals to actually sell to the United States and bring them here. And so I'd hope that we could work on that, how we can incentivize that. Or if we can't do it here, how can we help our friends to be able to process their own natural resources? Because, I keep telling them, well, it's great. So you sell it to China, and then they process it, and they sell it right back to you. So it's costing you money to sell your stuff to them in the end because the finished product comes back this way. And so we need to stop that. And we need to break the stranglehold that the CCP has on all these critical minerals. And by the way, you have to take your hat off to them. They don't have a 2-year view. They don't have a 5-year view. They have a 100-year view. And they're just going to wait us out.
Yeah.
And so we also have to have that kind of patience that, no, this is the way we're going. Finally, I would hope that also, and I'm not sure we need to expand on the work of this. And I know we do have to expand a lot of work that on the China committee, we need to continue it, need to have it into the 119th. There's so many other things we need to do. But one thing that I want to do is also fund research that will make these minerals and materials obsolete. Change the game. So, it struck me fairly quickly that we're now trying to play catch up. Instead of playing catch up, why don't we take a shortcut somewhere else and let them catch up to us? I would love one day for lithium to be absolutely worthless. And then all of the time and effort and money that they invested in becoming dominant in lithium would go to naught because lithium is worthless now. Okay, it's like when cars came around, the demand for buggy whips dropped tremendously. And so I want to make lithium and all those other minerals as much link them to make them buggy whips as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
So that we become dominant in the new technology, and we need to fund research for that. And finally, on the environment, there may be some things that we need to do here in the United States that some of my friends on the other side, well, it's not good for the environment. And I will say this: we're much better at the environment than China is. So if you want to protect the environment, then make us the dominant player in all of these areas, because we will protect the environment. China does not. Right now, China is the world's #1 polluter, by far. They create a new coal-fired electric plant every week. They're also contracting with other countries, especially in Africa, to build coal-fired plants in their countries. This whole thing that somehow they're environmentally conscious is a pile of hooey. Right? They sell us their solar panels, they sell us their wind turbines, but they don't use them. And so, really you want to protect the environment, we need to, beat China at their own game. I'm not saying that we need to be environmentally unfriendly. We are much friendlier to the environment than they are, but, we need to beat them at their game. And so again, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to hopefully, serving on the next Congress in the China Committee. I think this is one of the most important committees that we have, and these subcommittees that look at different aspects of it. I hope that we continue the work. We've started the work, but I think we need to continue the work on critical minerals, especially how do we help ourselves and our partners and our neighbors, and how to develop the processing capacity that they need in order for them to keep their own natural resources and dry up that market. And so, thank you. It was an honor serving with everybody on this subcommittee, and I yield back.
Well, thank you, Mr. Menez. I appreciate it. Bring up some great points. Research here is incredibly important. We have alternatives to things like graphite anodes and batteries using silicon conductors. Those things are great. The challenge for us in this nation is we do some of the groundbreaking research, and then it is applied at scale by who? The Chinese. We have to make sure we make the link between the great research that we do here and scaling that research so that it actually results in manufacturing capabilities here in the United States. That's too where we need to focus on things, because that's where we kind of lose in this leap to where we need to be. I did want to take a few minutes and go through these bills in just a little more depth so that you all have an understanding about what are in these bills. And I'm going to start with the first one, the Earth Sciences and Cooperation Enhancement Act. And I want to make sure I turn to my colleague, Ms. Castor, for her reflection on this. But the Earth Sciences and Cooperation Enhancement Act is really about looking at what can we do to leverage, as I talked about, our technology. What can we do to leverage technology of our friends and partners around the world to do more and to raise the sense of urgency to do things on a more formal basis, to have the Department of Interior enter into memorandums of understanding with other nations, to actually fund these efforts to make sure we have those conversations, that those conversations result in a meaningful expansion of capacity and capability in the United States. As I said, for years, we do a lot of great research here, and people will read about it. They go, wow, look at the great research and technology that's been developed here in the United States. And then all of a sudden we look at its application, and its application is being executed by the Chinese. That's got to stop. What we want to make sure we're doing is taking advantage of what we have, as well as our friends and partners around the world. The thing that scares China the most is us being able to apply our technology and not surrender it to them, which they use coercive means to do that. And what also scares them is when we partner with other nations, because they know that that's where the true ability to affect change comes from, is our ability to do that. So, Kathy, I'll turn to you. I know you've got some thoughts on this, on the Earth Sciences and Cooperation.
Yeah, I'm excited about all of these bills. So let's get into the details, because throughout our meetings, we've examined the urgent need for the United States to diversify and secure its supply chains. And we have to work together with partners. And Congressman Jimenez makes a very important point. We can do this in an environmentally sustainable way. We can be the leaders in developing the recycling, the circular economy with our allies and partners. So the Earth Sciences and Cooperation Enhancement Act focuses on that international cooperation in geoscience and the supply chains. It authorizes $3 million for the Secretary of the Interior to enter into memoranda of understanding with foreign governments to support collaboration in their sciences and supply chains. This is a powerful step towards building the kind of international cooperation that's needed to address the challenges that we face. We have to share expertise and resources. In doing so, we can build a more resilient and sustainable global supply chain. We can reduce the vulnerabilities and increase our collective security. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank the professional staff on both sides of the aisle who've helped us craft this bill, but the other ones, the one that Rep. Stevens is leading on export controls, which is also kind of goes hand in hand with Earth Sciences Cooperation Enhancement Act. And then, and I encourage you to dive into that report because we're not done. We have to do more. We have to continue the good work of the administration now and put a lot of that into law, put the heft of the Congress behind what's happening. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. I appreciate it. And I want to thank Steve for her, incredible direction and passion about things like controlling exports. It makes no sense whatsoever that we go through the base reprocessing of things like cobalt and lithium, and then we take those substances, that black mass that actually has value, we send it back to the Chinese because we either don't want to or don't have the capability to process that into the stream of producing those materials here. I would argue that if we actually had a production stream of materials here, we would keep it in this country, but we don't because the Chinese do it. And to be able to use recycled materials, you have to have some stream of raw materials to inject that into to make sure you have the right balance. Just like when you're recycling glass, it's not all recycled glass. It's putting some recycled glass in with new silica to produce that. The same thing here. It makes no sense that, we have substances that are mined by China, many times in other areas of the world, where they use forced labor, where they destroy the environment, where they exploit the countries that they're there. 16 of the 18 mines in Africa are owned by China. And I can guarantee you those agreements are not to the mutual benefit of those African countries. So when we are purchasing these devices, and these are full of components that are manufactured in China from materials that are mined in places like Africa at the expense of people in those countries and the expense of the environment. And then all of a sudden we go, well, now we're going to take these devices and recycle it, take that material back out. And you would think at that particular point, we'd say, well, we're going to cut China out of the supply chain. We can actually cut them out of the supply chain. That's a place where we have control. You can say, we're going to cut them off at the pass. But what do? We take all those materials and we do the first step in processing, and then we send them back to China, so that when you go and you buy your iPhone 16 and you look at the materials that's in your iPhone 16, guess what? They're materials that probably were mined in Africa, processed in China, put into a semiconductor, put into your iPhone 13 that you now send back as part of the return program, and then that phone gets processed, and then that recycled material goes back to China, and it comes back to you in a premium that you pay for your iPhone 16. I mean, that can only occur in a science fiction novel, but unfortunately, it's the reality of what we deal with. We have full control about where we can regain control over these critical parts of the value chain. And that's our job here, and that's why the Export Reform Control Act is so incredibly important. And then, too, if we're going to get back into this space, workforce. Listen, we can have the technology. We got great technology, but you know what? We need people there out in the field to do this work. Listen, we will do more to protect workers than anybody in the world. We will not use forced labor. We will make sure that we have safe workplace conditions. We will make sure that we pay those individuals a significant wage, unlike China, that will use forced labor, that will violate human rights standards by any measure, and will destroy the environment. I mean, when we buy either the value-added products in the form of electronics or in the form of other materials, we are actually enabling China to continue to do these things. So if we want to cut them off at the pass, We make sure that we are processing our own materials here. We make sure we build our own workforce. That is the most effective way to counter what China is doing. And their effort is, by every measure, not to compete, but to destroy the United States and our friends and allies around the world economically. That is their intent. And they will lie, and they will cheat, and they will steal in order to accomplish that. Let's call it for what it is. And they don't make any apologies about it. They just say, hey, listen, we're going to do that. They believe that the ends justifies the means. Let's call it out for what it is. We will not do that. We operate by a much higher standard in this nation. I argue the way that we actually advance those causes, the causes of abiding by the rule of law, the causes of human rights, the causes of environmental stewardship, is for us to do exactly the things that are reflected in these bills that we have here today. That's how we can make the biggest change and make the most immediate change in the things that have to happen in the world we see unfolding around us. So I am very honored to have some incredible members on our work group. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for your faith that you've placed in Ms. Castor and myself, and for the members that you have appointed to our committee. I think we've taken a great first step. I tell folks we are graduating from a walking pace to a jogging pace. And our challenge now is to get to the running pace. So anyway. Any additional comments? Covered. Very good. Kathy, any
Nope, I think
comments?
we're ready for questions.
Very good. Any questions, comments, thoughts? We're glad to answer your questions. Sir.
My understanding is one of the issues with critical minerals mining, processing, and recycling in the U.S. is that there isn't an economic incentive for companies to do those activities. Is there any thought to almost a CHIPS Act-like action to help provide that economic incentive?
Yeah, listen, there's some other concepts that we've explored and we've had witnesses come in and talk about. And, we're continuing to explore those things. Kathy and I have had conversations about how do we get that to a point where we are able to effectively counteract China's unfair trade practices. And you see what they do to try to dominate the world. If you go back to their memo of July 10th, where they essentially said, we're not exporting technology on rare earth magnets or rare earth temperature sensors. And they said there that they were not going to export these critical minerals or rare earth elements to countries that didn't follow what China directed them to do. They manifested that by making an announcement last week that they were going to ban the export of those materials here to the United States. So our job is to look at how do we provide a structure of supply and demand that will operate outside of China's unfair trade practices. I mean, they look to do things that just completely displace the United States and our friends and allies from those areas, and they want us to be subjected to their coercion through complete control of those materials. So, we're looking at a number of efforts to be able to do that. We've had some great ideas and testimony from others. So I see that as the next significant step that this work group will take, along with the select committee, to make sure we have indeed that. A lot of discussion now about tariffs. And listen, tariffs don't work when you have zero participation in the supply chain. When China owns 100% of the world's source of gallium, tariffs don't work. So we have to get back into the business of producing these things. And then you can talk about how do we have more leverage in unfair trade practices.
Do the proposed tariffs, especially on countries like Canada that has critical minerals deposited and some processing, do tariff threats on countries like that make it more difficult to work with them to either nearshore or offshore those critical mineral production activities?
Well, listen, at this point, I don't want to get into any of the details because there haven't been any details provided about what those would look like, what materials would they be on. I think it's a good, fruitful discussion to talk about, what do we do with our friends and allies in areas that are critical to all of us. I think those discussions need to take place. I think they need to take place too about, what does fair trade look like with our friends and allies? What are the things that we can do to actually enhance that? I think it's really premature to get into any of the details about tariffs. I know that they've been mentioned, but it really is about the details about how do you make sure that you have healthy trade agreements for both countries, for the United States and the countries that we have these relationships with.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add? I would just say I really appreciate Congressman Whitman's intense interest in solving this problem, and we need to move forward on something on price stabilization and building the circular economy that may be tied to certain tax credits. We've seen how a lot of the tax credits out of the Inflation Reduction Act have spurred enormous private sector investment in manufacturing. And so you'll notice in our report, we ask for ideas and participation from the private sector across America. We need their insight. We need the best ideas, and we look forward to tackling that in the coming year.
Thank you.